So this is a video I really did not want to make. It's about a YouTuber who plagiarized a part of my script for his own video. These timelines continuously intercut and inform each other.
A
YouTuber who, as it turned out, had done this before to others.
There's a certain amount of subtlety and slower pacing that's usually effective for developing a main character.
And who, after we tried to resolve it amicably in private, just kept on doing it again and again.
By this point, the Tarantino set piece is a trademark.
By this point, the Tarantino set piece is one of his trademarks.
While accumulating hundreds of thousands, sometimes even millions of views.
This is a single unbroken 90-second take.
This scene is a single unbroken 90-second take.
And so, after discussing it with those involved and seeing no other recourse, here we are, let's talk about plagiarism. So I'm just gonna jump straight into the full story. A few months ago I was watching this video essay on the movie Oppenheimer by the fairly popular YouTube channel Archer Green, who at some point made an observation that I also made in my own video about that movie. In Memento we were presented with two timelines. One that starts at the very end of the story and that plays out in reverse chronological order.
One that starts at the end and goes backwards.
And one that unfolds regularly from the earliest point in the story.
And one that starts at the beginning and goes forwards.
And that's okay, that can happen. I didn't think it was a particularly mind-blowing insight to begin with. But then I recognized one line that was exactly the same as it was in my script. These timelines continuously intercut and inform each other until they ultimately converge in the middle, which to us is the end of the movie.
These timelines continually intercut and inform each other until they finally converge in the middle, which to us is at the end of the movie.
And that's when it got worse. If we strip it down to its absolute essence, there are also two converging timelines here.
If we strip it down, we have two timelines.
One that follows Oppenheimer's life up until the Trinity test in 1945.
Oppenheimer's timeline follows his life up until the Trinity test in 1945.
And one that begins with Strauss's Senate confirmation hearing in 1959 and that sort of looks backwards to cover everything that happens after Oppenheimer creates the bomb.
Strauss's timeline begins with his confirmation hearing in 1959 and sort of looks backwards to cover everything that happened after Trinity.
The point of convergence for both of these stories is a conversation between Oppenheimer and Einstein that took place in 1947.
And both of these converge in 1947 with Oppenheimer's conversation with Einstein.
As you can tell, at this point it's just my video verbatim, copying both the writing as well as the ideas that were being conveyed. In this middle section of the story, that we find a key revelation that not only ties the two storylines together, but that also gives us a pivotal insight into our main character.
It's in this moment that we not only tie the two timelines together, but it's also a pivotal moment in both characters' journey.
It gives us one last insight into Oppenheimer's mind that helps us to understand both the true outcome of the first timeline, of everything that happened before the Trinity test.
We get a final look into Oppenheimer's worldview, helping us understand the true outcome of the first timeline.
He even messes it up here at the end. As well as the motivation that has been the true driving force of everything that came after.
It also helps us understand Strauss's motivation, which was the true driving force of everything that came after Trinity.
Did you catch that? I referred to Oppenheimer's climactic revelation as being the true motivation driving the events after the Trinity test. It gives us one last insight into Oppenheimer's mind that helps us to understand both the true outcome of the first timeline, as well as the motivation that has been the true driving force of everything that came after. But he mistakenly changed this to Strauss's perspective.
It also helps us understand Strauss's motivation, which was the true driving force of everything that came after Trinity.
Anyways, I didn't want to start a public drama because it was just a small portion of my video that he used for his, and I wasn't sure if calling that out publicly would lead to a punishment that was greater than the crime. Especially considering the possibility that this was just a one-time mistake. And so I reached out to him privately. I said, hey, it looks like you copied a part of my work. I'm not asking you to take down the video or anything, but I do wish you could have given proper credit and hope you can do so in the future. To which he replied that he checked both videos again and acknowledged they were indeed very similar. He apologized, claiming it wasn't deliberate, that he made notes of my video while researching his, and that he must have wrote relied on them too heavily while writing his script. I replied accepting his apology and also to once more emphasize that my issue was not that he didn't change the words enough, but rather that he took the idea from me without clearly acknowledging that in the video. He then thanked me for my understanding and for the advice, included a reference in the description of his video, which, is not great, but it's something, and assured me that he'd keep it in mind in the future. And I was hoping that would be it, but around the same time, my friend and fellow creator Thomas Flight got an email from a fan warning him that a video of his had been plagiarized. That there's this channel called Archer Green who made a video that was very similar to his.
Yeah, I had some people who contacted me about the video, and I didn't pay that close attention to it. I looked at his video briefly, and I thought just because someone has the same commentary about a kind of work or a director's technique or something like that doesn't mean that they stole that from me directly. I don't have I don't own any piece of commentary that I come up with. But then later another fan contacted me, and they actually brought to my attention that I hadn't noticed a place in the video where Archer Green had actually directly ripped my script for part of his video. However, when trying to quickly create a memorable minor character, there's often not enough time to be subtle about things.
However, when trying to quickly create a memorable minor character, there usually isn't enough time for subtlety.
The Coen brothers are a lot of things, but subtle is not one of the words I would use to describe most of their filmmaking.
Subtle is not one of the words I'd use to describe the Coen brothers.
The over-the-top and exaggerated style they've perfected for their comedy films makes them well-suited to create these characters quickly.
Their over-the-top style developed for their comedy films makes them well-suited to quickly develop memorable side characters.
But they've also learned to apply some of those techniques more subtly in their dramatic films.
But these techniques are also applied in their dramatic films.
If he had just made a video on the same topic, to me, I would have just given him the benefit of the doubt and marked it up to, hey, maybe we just had the same idea. But knowing that there was literally pieces of my script that must have been transcribed or copy and pasted into his video without any credit, to me, that's what crossed the line.
After this, Thomas also reached out to Archer Green. What was his initial response?
He apologized and took the video offline, which I requested. So it was very amicable. He agreed to take it down and seemed sorry about the plagiarism.
Now, because this case was older than mine, we were still willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Clearly this guy made some mistakes in the past, and I don't know his life. Maybe he genuinely didn't believe he was doing anything wrong. Maybe he just didn't know the proper etiquette for referencing other works, which, to be fair, is still kind of foggy in the YouTube community, and which is an issue I'll get back to in a bit. But surely, now that he's been called out privately by two somewhat sizable creators, maybe he'll at least make an effort to do better from now on. Nope. One of Archer Green's latest videos is about Quentin Tarantino, and at one point discusses the Tarantino set piece as a trademark of his work.
By this point, the Tarantino set piece is one of his trademarks.
Just as this video by The Discarded Image did about 4 years ago.
By this point, the Tarantino set piece is a trademark.
Julian, who runs the channel The Discarded Image, also happens to be a friend of Thomas and mine, which is why we were even made aware of this in the first place.
He's modified it somewhat, and it was a video that was co-written and edited by Luis Azevedo, and that section of the video is one of the more kind of dynamically edited pieces.
Major Marquess Warren, baiting the general.
I know the day he died.
Major Marquess Warren, baiting the general.
I know the day he died.
So, yeah, it was not just taking the words that we wrote, but also emulating the editing style.
An unsuspecting beginning.
An unknown start.
Rising tension.
Mounting suspense.
And in some parts, literally using the same words and the same B-roll from the films.
And then
and then
I've been out of the YouTube game for a little while, so I'm not sure it offended me that deeply myself, because it's an old video, but it was in the context of what's been going on with you guys that that I thought it was more egregious and sent it to you. It's kind of baffling, really, that someone, after being told that they're plagiarizing, if I was in his position and I was an up and coming YouTuber, and two big video essayists who are well known in the scene got in touch with me and said, "You're plagiarizing our work, can you stop it please?" I'd be mortified. Like, I'd be living in a cave right now, probably.
I'm not sure if Archer Green is just deliberately targeting our little friend group or if that's just an unfortunate coincidence on his part. But anyways, at this point there clearly seems to be a pattern emerging where it looks like Archer Green is just taking bits and pieces from other creators to make his own videos. Now, I obviously can't say how deep this rabbit hole goes and how many other creators are affected, but as I was writing this video, Archer Green did drop a new video on Indiana Jones, and after just a few minutes of comparing Archer Green's video with the top results of video essays on the same movie, I immediately found Every Frame a Painting's iconic video on the Spielberg Oneer, which Archer Green copies from without referencing him.
This is a single unbroken 90-second take.
this scene is a single unbroken 90-second take
The great thing about it is that it's basically 4 different shots in one.
that basically includes 4 different compositions in one.
And no matter how many times I watch it, I still forget the exact timing, so it's always funny when this happens.
But because there's no editing, we don't expect the timing of this.
And this video from Cinema Sticks, which Archer Green also clearly took some notes from.
Making full use of the foreground and the background to show what a character sees or what they don't.
This is a technique Spielberg uses throughout the movie, often used to tell us what the character sees or what they don't.
It's also worth noting that Archer Green's general style and formatting is just a blatant copy of that of Cinema Sticks, who as far as I know is the one who came up with that sort of meme style format of titles and thumbnails. I don't think this one is that big of an issue, as YouTubers do tend to borrow stylistic elements from each other like this, especially when a particular trend has proven to play very well with the YouTube algorithm. I have done this myself with that split screen versus style thumbnail, which Thomas Flight originally came up with, but which just works so annoyingly well that it was almost bound to become used by others. But then again, there is of course still a line here between just borrowing popular presentational elements to draw in an audience and fully copying someone's entire voice and vibe. And to what extent Archer Green is guilty of that last one, I don't know, I don't want to be the judge of that. The point is that his acts of plagiarism are clearly not just isolated incidents, but part of an ongoing pattern that may or not include more affected creators. And more importantly, because he doesn't seem to be capable of or willing to change his ways even after being made aware of his transgressive behavior, he seems to be in need of a more in-depth lesson. And so let's take this opportunity to briefly talk about the real nature and problem of plagiarism, which we can do by looking at another recent Archer Green video in which he got so close to making a reference, but somehow still committed a plagiarism. Before the Tarantino video, Archer Green released a video on special effects in movies.
Visual effects are an illusion. You're essentially trying to trick the audience into believing something is there, when in reality it isn't. So the more of the effects you hide, the less chances there are for this illusion to break.
Keep in mind that this was also after Thomas and I had confronted him about his plagiarism. The video itself doesn't explicitly refer to any other works, but the description does list a few videos as references, which might seem like a step in the good direction, but it actually offers a good example of the misunderstandings that some creators seem to have about what is and what isn't plagiarizing. So, one of the videos that is listed here is a video about Davy Jones by the channel CJ CGY.
Visual effects is a bit like a magic trick. It's an illusion designed to trick your brain, and much like a real magic trick, the less you show your audience, the more they're going to believe in your illusion.
And indeed, if you put the two videos side by side, you can clearly tell that some bits are directly copied.
And this is why films like Transformers and the first Iron Man look so good in the bright daytime.
It's why the early Iron Man and Transformers movies look so good.
Because the reflective surface just turns into this bright, overexposed, detailless highlight.
Because the metallic surface reflects the light, overexposing part of the animation and obscuring details.
And more generally, that some of the same ideas, including the same examples to explain them, are carried over.
And so, dark lighting is obviously ideal for this, because all of this darkness is just going to occlude your CGI naturally.
Almost all of Davy Jones's scenes are in low light or during nighttime. His face is covered in shadows, so the effects are concealed in a natural way.
But how does pure daytime brightness hide anything?
But then we also have scenes like this.
Well, this plays in masterfully with the reflective nature of his skin.
But a lot of the detail is actually still hidden. How? Reflections.
But the problem is that even if viewers see that reference in the description, which, let's be honest, most people won't, Archer Green doesn't explain what parts exactly he uses. There's no explicit distinction between his own ideas and that of the CGY video.
Once something is sufficiently close enough to looking like a real human, our brains kick in and begin to subconsciously criticize it and pull it apart and just find these tiny little subconscious flaws with it.
For normal humans, we subconsciously notice any small error in how their skin moves, and it feels off.
He would begin to edge into the territory known as the uncanny valley. And so that's why a photorealistic CG human still hasn't really been done yet.
It's the uncanny valley effect. It's why fully CGI human characters have never been 100% perfect.
And that is what makes it plagiarism. That's what makes this whole thing so problematic. He passes every idea off as if it were his own, and in doing so virtually erases the work of all those creators who came before him and whose ideas allowed him to make his videos in the first place.
Whereas, you have no idea what a living tentacle beard should 100% correctly look like.
But for Davy Jones, we have no idea how a living tentacle beard should 100% look.
They pulled Jones out of the uncanny valley,
So he's pulled out of the uncanny valley.
stopping our brains from reading him as a fellow human face, which in turn stops that criticism instinct from kicking in and more easily accept him as something real.
Stopping us from noticing any inaccuracies, and our brain more readily accepts this illusion as being real.
Now, as mentioned before, there aren't any formal guidelines for properly making references in a YouTube video. Not unlike in the academic world, where you have to adhere to strict formats that all look slightly different depending on what kind of source you're referring to, be it a book, a research paper, a web page, or whatever. And so I get that it's hard to know where to draw the line in an online space where all this is still a work in progress, especially if you haven't been formally educated on any form of referencing in the first place. But there are some basic principles that I think anyone should be able to grasp.
The fact that two people could have the same idea about a piece of media, or that even somebody might take someone else's concept and then expound upon that, is totally normal. That's a part of media criticism, film criticism and writing and stuff like that. But I think the difference is you cite and recognize the sources that you're pulling the ideas from. That's what makes it not plagiarism, as well as adding additional commentary of your own. The bulk and substance of the work should be something that is original to the person. If you're just copying something from somebody else, not attributing it to them, that's where I think it crosses the line into plagiarism rather than inspiration.
Personally, I also like to play it safe and just show as much as possible on screen. If I'm building on someone's idea, I'll mention them, and if I'm reading a quote, I'll make that clear and display the source of the quotation. That should be pretty doable, right? But then again, I recognize that these are principles that don't necessarily come naturally, which is also why I'm still willing to employ Hanlon's razor and attribute Archer Green's plagiarism to ignorance rather than to malice. Like if you've seen that H. Palmer guy video on YouTube Plagiarism, which deals with some highly narcissistic, emotionally manipulative and pathologically lying individuals, I don't think that's the case here. I don't believe Archer Green needs to be deplatformed, and I definitely do not wish for him to be bullied or harassed, so just to emphasize, that's not the point here.
I don't particularly want to railroad the guy. I don't know if he's, a teenager, like he could be just 19 or early 20s, who knows, and doesn't really have a sense of the ethics of film criticism, even though he's been told not to do it. So I am giving him the benefit of doubt.
I too hope that, if anything, you might actually give him a chance to do better now that he understands the gravity of the situation. I'd love for this to turn into a redemption arc rather than a tragic downfall. Because aside from the plagiarism, he does make pretty good videos. He's clearly a good editor, and he does seem to grasp that basic principle of collecting different ideas and combining them into something sort of original. He just needs to learn how to go about it more honestly, because at the end of the day, plagiarism does matter, and it can result in real harm. At the time of making this, Archer Green's Oppenheimer video has more views than mine. His Coen brother videos had more views than Thomas's. But even so, I don't think we can honestly claim we've really suffered because of this. My video also performed quite well, and so did those of Thomas and Julian. But I can't say the same for smaller creators who may potentially have had their work absorbed by YouTubers like Archer Green, and who subsequently might be getting overshadowed by the YouTube algorithm, resulting in a lack of recognition and even a substantial loss of income.
My video on the Coen brothers' minor characters was performing pretty well for a certain period of time, and then you can see where it flatlines in the analytics. And
oh, really?
And his video was continuing to do well after that time period. I can't prove that his video displaced mine in the algorithm, but if it did, then that's literally eating into my livelihood.
And more generally, plagiarizing other works like this just goes against the spirit of what it means to be part of a community. In the academic world at least, these strict rules and formats for referencing other works aren't just there because it's the morally right thing to do towards others, or because it lends more credibility to your own work. No, it also affirms that greater ideal that you're contributing to a shared body of knowledge, that you're building on those who came before you, and that you're taking part in this causal chain in which the movement and evolution of ideas is always accounted for and can be traced back to its source. Again, it's about being part of a community, which does exist on YouTube.
It also made me think about the reason why I'm here today is because I think it was about 2017, 2018. It was, I believe, Luis Azevedo and Entertain the Elk who set up a Facebook group where video essayists all got to know each other and became friends. Thomas Flight came to my wedding. I believe he went to your wedding. We talk fairly frequently. We've been probably inspired by each other. We borrow techniques, give advice. It's just like, it's a bit cheesy coming from a Brit, but it's been a nourishing and rewarding community. And it's a shame that someone like Archer Green didn't have the opportunity to experience that, and instead is just using the video essay community to for his own benefit.
We already face a lot of difficulty doing this kind of work on YouTube. We're fighting against copyright claims all the time. It's not necessarily easy work. And so to have other video essayists nabbing your stuff for themselves is a little frustrating for sure.
And even if you don't care about any of that, you might still want to do better just for your own sake.
When you do this kind of thing, it is a detriment to your viewers and yourself, because you're not developing your own skill in analysis and commentary. You're just relying on regurgitating what other people are saying. And so when you eventually inevitably get found out or caught, then you're going to be up the creek, because you haven't developed that ability on your own.
On a more practical level, it's also just so much easier to just directly quote someone rather than go through the hassle of rewriting their words enough for it to not look like plagiarism anymore. And much more interesting to explicitly respond to pre-existing ideas rather than try and pass them off as your own. Because that way you can really draw that line between what has already been said and your contribution to it. You know, that's where you can bring in your own originality, where you can really add thoughts and ideas that are unmistakably yours. Plus, it also shields you from taking a reputational hit by becoming the subject of a video like this one.
It's a shame because he's about 100,000 subscribers now, and I know how difficult it was for me. I know how much work I put in to get to that point, and it's a shame to put all that work in and take a reputational hit like this, which I'm sure is going to happen. But you know, you play with fire, you get burned.
Anyways, to close this off, I just want to emphasize once more that while I think it is important to hold plagiarizing channels accountable, both for the sake of the creators whose work is being stolen, as well as for the sake of the fans who aren't aware that a channel they like is stealing from others, I also believe there's room for compassion and understanding here. Especially in this case, I think that if in his next videos Archer Green would be only slightly more mindful about using other people's ideas, then all of this would be resolved and I'd happily take this video down. But I guess that's up to him.
You know, he has, obviously, it seems like the capacity to do analysis and commentary outside of what he's taking from other people. So just do only that. You know, it's harder. You have to think a lot and come up with whole videos on your own. That's why, you know, it takes us like a month to make a whole video. But that's what you have to do. That's the name of the game.
Do better if you can, Archer. Like, have some respect for the community you're a part of.
And if you do find something that somebody else says that you want to use, then you reference that. You quote them on screen. You tell the audience clearly in the video, not just hide it in the description, but clearly tell them in the video where you got it from, and then you build upon that. Or you talk to the creator directly and ask their permission to, you know, to use that or base something off of that.
I'd also like you to keep in mind that in the bigger scheme of things, Archer Green is just one small blip in a much, much bigger problem. Not long ago I was notified of a Proof News investigation that uncovered how some of the biggest AI companies have been training their AI models using YouTube videos without the knowledge or consent of their creators, which is essentially a form of theft and which also included 13 of my videos, which is about 10% of my entire channel. I don't understand AI well enough to know what this means or what implications this will have in the future, but I can imagine it will be much worse than one creator who doesn't know how to make a proper reference. Either way, I'll link the article in the description so you can check that out for yourself. I guess that's it for now. As always, a big thank you to everyone who has been watching and supporting my work. Make sure to also follow Thomas Flight, who is consistently making some of the best cinema-related video essays, and The Discarded Image, whose video on Tarantino probably still is the best articulation of why Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is an absolute masterpiece. You can find both of their channels in the description below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.